Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to continue with Russia. I'll remind you that yesterday the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, stated that a decision has been made to create a security buffer zone along the border between Russia and Ukraine. Putin later specified for which Russian regions a security buffer zone will be created. And according to Putin, according to his yesterday's statement, a buffer zone will be created for the Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions. These regions border the Kharkiv, Sumy, and Chernigov regions respectively. The Russian armed forces will create a buffer zone on the territory of Ukraine. So this is very important detail. But telling the truth, since the beginning of the special military operation, and even more precisely since the beginning of Ukrainian offensive operation in the Kursk region, the Russians, the president of the Russian Federation, Putin, announced the creation of this secure zone for 3 or 4 times. So, but when talking about his yesterday's statement, we see that yesterday he was serious as never. As for the beginning of the 23rd of May of 2025, the Russians still haven't started anything. At the same time, the Ukrainians continue bombing and attacking the territory of the Russian Federation with drones, and according to information we have, during the previous 12 hours, another batch of drones entered the territory of the Russian Federation. Several of them reached the capital of Russia, the city of Moscow. When talking about the northern part of Ukraine and the northeastern part, almost no activities, just regular strikes, artillery duels, and so on. Most likely the Russians are preparing themselves before the beginning of this operation. But when talking about the most eastern part, we're talking about the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are very active in this area. And once again, the battle and the main activities are coming back to the city of Volchansk. I'll remind you that several days ago, the Russians launched their offensive operation in this area, and I'd remind you that by the 21st of May of 2025, the Russians managed to secure the most eastern part of the settlement. So we came to this conclusion based on the videos that were published by the Ukrainian sources, and based on this video, we see that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the most northern part of the city of Volchansk. So this is probably the situation, and this is probably the primary target for the Russians at this stage of the special military operation, to finish the battle for the city of Volchansk. And for example, today, by the morning of the 23rd of May of 2025, we got additional report about the situation in this area, and several neutral mappers confirmed the information that was probably spread by the Russian sources during the previous days, that the Russians managed to almost completely establish complete control over this forest to the south of the border. As for now, there are very heavy clashes for the central and the eastern part, but we see that this is already just a matter of time, but not a matter of question whether the Russians are able or are going to do this. So the battle for the northern Volchansk is about to be finished, and this is going to be probably the first stage of creation of this secure zone that was announced by the president of Russia. When talking about the northern Kupiansk direction, currently the most interesting updates are coming from the northeast western part of the city itself. We have reports that, according to several pro-Russian resources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation probably once again managed to enter the northeastern part of Kondrashevka. Currently, there are very heavy clashes for this area, but we expect that the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. This is a very important village because, as you can see, there is road R79, and Ukrainians used to use this road R79 with the purpose to probably rotate, move forces, bring additional reinforcements from the city of Kupiansk in the northwestern direction towards, let's say, this pocket between the city of Volchansk and, let's say, the river of Oskol. So if the Russians are able to cut this road, this is going to be a very huge problem for the Ukrainians. And for example, I remind you that since the beginning of May, we got probably tens of videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking exactly the western and the northwestern part of the city of Kupiansk with FAB 3000, with FAB 1500, and with different types of artillery systems. So we see that the Russians were bombing and attacking this area, probably trying to reduce Ukrainian capabilities of bringing and introducing additional forces in the area of Kondrashevka. And now, due to the fact that the Russians, due to this report that the Russians most likely entered the village of Kondrashevka, we expect that the Russians finish their artillery preparation in the city of Kupiansk itself. So the next days are going to be very interesting exactly for this direction. And we believe that currently likely the Russians are trying and are planning to establish complete control over everything inside of this red line. This is very important for the Russians if they are planning to move further, either in the in the northwestern direction and the southwestern direction as well. Now let's talk about the Liman direction. Very interesting updates we are receiving from the settlement of Tarskoye. Today we got this video that was published by the Russian sources, and in this video, according to the author of this video, the Russians were attacking the edge positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the village by the name of Tarskoye. Later, several pro-Russian resources adjusted their maps back in the favor of the gray zone or in Ukrainian favor. So, according to information we have, the Russians were forced to fall back from the village of Tarskoye back in the direction of fields and the settlement of Yampolovka. So, as you can see, the Ukrainians most likely managed to regroup themselves and to carry out several successful counterattacks. And as a result of these counterattacks, the Russians lost control over the settlement and were forced to fall back. I'll remind you that the Russians reported that they managed to establish complete control over the city village of Tarskoye several days ago, before talks in Istanbul between the Russian delegation and the delegation of Ukraine. So most likely that attack carried out by the Russians was just a media attack with the purpose to show strong cards and to have better and stronger positions during the negotiation process. As of the beginning of the 23rd of May, we see that most likely the Russians were forced to fall back. As of now, we are not adjusting the map. We are waiting for more reliable resources and more reliable proofs.
My name is Peter Boleslav.
Now let's talk about the Kliban-Byksky pockets, about the situation of N32 road. During the previous 24 hours, we got most of updates from the N32 road area. According to information we have, the Russians continue their offensive operation from the village of Nova Alenovka in the direction of the village by the name of Yablunovka. According to several mappers, including neutral, pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian, the Russians took under control several tree lines in this direction. So these territories, as you can see, according to different sources, were taken by the Russians, and as we can see, the Russians are going to move further. The main problem for the Russians right now is these anti-tank ditches. Now they need to find a solution how to bring forces and how to take under control the southwestern part of the village of Yablunovka and how to bring additional vehicles in this area. This is obviously a very difficult task for the Russians, but not the next task. As for now, the Russians will continue offensive operation further with this purpose to establish complete control over every single tree line inside of this red line. And this is exactly what the Russians are trying to do right now. As for the most southern part of the pocket, we haven't received anything during the previous night. Most likely there are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are trying to retreat, they're trying to save as many as possible soldiers and vehicles, but without any proofs, without anything that can give us at least some insight regarding the situation in this area. Very interesting updates are coming on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. According to information we have that was reported by several pro-Russian resources, the Russians continue their offensive operation further in the direction of Popo Yar, and according to pro-Russian mappers, these stronghold, these trenches, were taken by the Russians. Furthermore, there are very heavy clashes on the line between Mirna and Malinovka. The Russians, at the same time, are trying to improve their positions in the northern direction by taking under control these trenches and fortifications. And, for example, according to information we have during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, the Russians managed to take several strongholds in this area, and the Russians are going to move further. But at the same time, we start receiving reports that Ukrainians are trying to slow down the Russians by counterattacking them from the village of Mirne. So basically, there are very heavy clashes for this side, and most likely the Russians will be forced to stop their offensive in the northern direction until they finish the situation with the central part. Furthermore, we start receiving reports that Ukrainians began retreating from this pocket. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were trying to evacuate their tank to retreat from this area and to save this vehicle, but the Russians managed to discover the movement of this tank, and then the Russians attacked this tank with several FPV drones, and at the end, this tank was completely destroyed. So this is very important because now we see that most likely Ukrainians realized that they have no chances to hold this pocket for a very long period of time, and now the Ukrainians are trying to save their vehicles and to remove them from this area towards the Pokrovsk agglomeration. So we are going to receive more updates, obviously, from this area. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources claim that the situation here is very difficult, and the Ukrainians reported that they are waiting within the next several weeks the beginning of the battle for the most important settlement in the eastern flank of the city of Pokrovsk, the city of Novoekonomichna. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the southernest direction, where the clashes for the village of Odradna continues. Today we have several changes on the ground that was provided by neutral mappers and by pro-Russian resources, and as you can see, according to them, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to answer the village of Odradna from the south and the village of Odradna from the east, and currently the Russians control around 55% of this area. The Ukrainians are trying to concentrate themselves in the most northwestern part of the village, trying to be as close as possible to the main roads of evacuation. And in this video, we can see how the Russians were attacking with FPV drones the area where the Ukrainians are concentrated. So we expect, and according to several very reliable pro-Russian resources, that the village of Odradna would be taken today by the Russians by the end of the 23rd of May. Very likely the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information as well. When talking about the Zaporozhye or the Gulyai-Polya direction, because we believe that this is exactly the Gulyai-Polya direction, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlements of Zelene Polya and Novopol. Today, several more pro-Russian resources, very reliable resources, confirmed that both villages are about to be taken by the Russians. Maybe not today, but obviously this is going to happen during the upcoming weekend. And then the Russians will continue moving further in the direction of the village of Timirovka and Obratne. This will allow the Russians to get as close as possible to the settlement of Uspienacha, which is obviously the first task of the Russians in their offensive operation towards the city of Gulyai-Polya. And that's it for the short video. Military summary.